The small community hall buzzed with laughter that evening. People were chatting, children were running around, and music played faintly from an old speaker in the corner. The walls were lined with fading posters of past events, school plays, small talent shows, and charity drives. In one corner, half covered with a white cloth, stood a worn-out piano that no one had touched for years. When she walked in, her eyes went straight to that piano. It wasn't shiny or new, but there was something about it that caught her attention. She could almost feel it calling out to her. She slowly walked closer, brushing her hand across the edge of the dusty keys. Her heart skipped a beat. "Don't tell me you're thinking of playing that thing," someone said behind her, laughing. It was one of the boys from her neighborhood. He looked at her with that teasing grin everyone knew too well. A few others turned around to watch. "Yeah, go ahead," another voice said mockingly. "Let's hear the next piano superstar." The small group laughed together and she felt her face burn. She didn't answer. Her fingers hovered above the keys, unsure. The laughter behind her grew louder. One of the older women nearby even shook her head, whispering something to another. "She shouldn't make a fool of herself," the woman murmured, loud enough for everyone to hear. It wasn't the first time she had been laughed at. She wasn't from a rich family, and her clothes were plain. People in the town often looked down on her family because they didn't have much. But inside her there was always this quiet longing. She loved the sound of the piano. She had only heard it in short clips on old television shows or in movies played on the community TV. Each time, it stirred something deep inside her, something she couldn't put into words. That night, as everyone else talked and laughed, she stayed near the piano. She pressed one key softly. The sound was slightly out of tune, but it still made her smile. It was a warm, pure sound, like a voice that had been waiting for someone to listen again. One of the boys whistled sarcastically. "Beautiful," he said in a mocking tone. The others joined in, clapping playfully. She turned away, pretending not to hear them, but the sting was real. When she got home that evening, her mother was sitting by the window, sewing a torn shirt. The house was small and quiet, with the smell of tea lingering in the air. She dropped her bag and sat down beside her mother. "You look upset," her mother said gently. "Did something happen at the event?" She hesitated. "They laughed at me." "Why?" "Because I wanted to play the piano." Her mother smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both love and sadness. "People laugh when they don't understand something," she said softly. "It doesn't mean you should stop doing what makes your heart happy." "But we can't even afford lessons," she whispered. "How am I supposed to learn?" Her mother didn't have an answer. The silence between them was long but comforting. She finally stood up, went to her small room, and lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. The sound of that one piano key echoed in her mind. She could still feel it under her fingertips. Days passed, but she couldn't stop thinking about the instrument. Every time she walked past the community hall, she slowed down. Sometimes she'd peek through the dusty window, hoping no one was there. The piano sat quietly inside, as if waiting for her return. One afternoon, when she was on her way back from school, she noticed an older man standing outside the hall. He was cleaning the windows with slow, careful movements. She recognized him. He used to be the music teacher in town years ago before he retired. She gathered some courage and asked shyly, "Sir, does that piano still work?" He looked at her over his glasses, studying her face. "Barely," he replied with a chuckle. "It's old, but it still sings if you treat it kindly." Her eyes brightened. "Would you maybe show me how to play it someday?" He paused for a moment, clearly surprised. Then a faint smile appeared. "Do you really want to learn?" She nodded quickly. "More than anything." "Then come by tomorrow afternoon," he said. "I'll be here." That night she could barely sleep. Her heart raced just thinking about it. For the first time she felt like something good was waiting for her, something that was truly hers. The next day, after finishing her chores, she hurried to the hall. The old man was already there, sitting by the piano. He motioned for her to sit beside him. The instrument looked even older up close, with chipped wood and uneven keys. But to her it was beautiful. "Before you play," he said kindly, "you must listen. Music isn't just sound, it's feeling. It's what happens when your heart finds a way to speak without words." She nodded, soaking in every word. He placed her hands on the keys and taught her the simplest notes. Her fingers trembled at first, pressing the wrong keys more than once. But he didn't get impatient. He laughed softly, saying, "Even the best pianists once made every mistake there is." She spent hours there that day, learning the basic scales, trying to match the rhythm he showed her. When she finally looked outside, the sun was already setting. From that day on, she began visiting the hall every afternoon. Some people noticed her going in and out but didn't think much of it. A few still teased her when they saw her carrying a small notebook filled with piano notes and drawings of keys. But she ignored them now. Each day she practiced, the sound became smoother, the notes clearer. Weeks turned into months. Her hands became stronger, more confident. Sometimes the old teacher would ask her to play alone while he listened from the corner. "Good," he'd say softly. "You're starting to understand the language of the piano." But outside that hall, the whispers never completely stopped. Some people said she was wasting her time. Others laughed that she was pretending to be something she wasn't. Their words still hurt. But she had learned to channel that hurt into her playing. One rainy afternoon, while she was practicing a simple melody, the door creaked open. A group of kids peeked in. They whispered and giggled, watching her fingers move across the keys. One of them said, "You really think you'll be a musician someday?" She didn't respond. She just kept playing. Her teacher, sitting in the corner, gave them a firm look, and they quickly ran off. After a few moments of silence, he said quietly, "Let them laugh. One day they'll listen." That line stayed with her for a long time. At home, she practiced on a piece of cardboard she had drawn to look like piano keys. It wasn't the same, but it helped her remember finger positions when she couldn't go to the hall. Sometimes she hummed the melodies she had learned, imagining the sound of real keys beneath her hands. Her mother watched her silently most evenings. She saw the glow in her daughter's eyes whenever she talked about music. Even though life was hard, seeing that passion gave her hope. As winter came, the town announced it would hold its annual community talent show. Posters went up on walls and lampposts. There would be singing, dancing, comedy acts, and a small prize for the winner. When she saw the poster, her heart pounded. She wanted to sign up, but doubt crept in. She went to the hall that day and told her teacher about it. "I want to play there," she said softly, "but I'm scared they'll laugh again." The old man smiled kindly. "Do you remember the first time you touched this piano?" "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "You were scared then too. But you played anyway, and the sound you made that day, it told me you have something special. The only thing that stops people from hearing it is your fear. Let them laugh if they want. Music has a way of silencing the noise." Those words lit something inside her. That night she filled out the form and wrote her name on the list of performers. When the organizers saw her name, some raised their eyebrows. A few even whispered among themselves, remembering how she had once been mocked for trying to play. But she didn't care anymore. The night before the show, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the crowd, the lights, and the piano sitting on that big stage. What if her hands shook? What if she forgot everything? She turned over again and again, trying to calm herself. Then she remembered her teacher's voice. "Let the music speak for you." She took a deep breath, smiled faintly in the darkness, and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, they'll listen." The morning of the talent show arrived sooner than she expected. The town hall was already alive with energy. Banners hung above the stage, and families gathered in groups laughing and chatting. The air smelled of popcorn and excitement. But for her, the noise only made her heart beat faster. She stood backstage, clutching her hands together, trying to calm herself. She peeked through the curtain. The piano sat in the middle of the stage, under the bright light. It looked bigger than she remembered, and for a moment fear gripped her chest. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Her teacher came up beside her. "Nervous?" he asked gently. She nodded. "A little." He smiled kindly. "Good, that means you care. But remember what I told you, don't play for them. Play for yourself." She nodded again. The noise of the crowd faded in her mind. She thought about all the evenings she had spent in that old hall, pressing keys until her fingers hurt. She thought about her mother's quiet smile and the people who once laughed at her. This was her moment to let the music speak. The show began. One by one, performers went up on stage, dancers, singers, even a magician. The audience clapped and cheered after every act. Her name was near the end of the list, which meant more time to wait, more time for her heart to race. She listened as a boy performed a funny song on his guitar. The crowd loved him. Then a group of girls danced to a pop tune, earning loud applause. When their turn ended, she heard the announcer's voice. "Next, we have..." and he said her name. Her breath caught. The spotlight moved. The crowd turned toward the stage. She walked out slowly, her hands trembling. Some people in the audience whispered when they saw her. A few even snickered quietly. But she kept walking, step by step, until she stood in front of the piano. The stage lights were bright and she could barely see the faces in the crowd. She sat down, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. The sound of her heartbeat filled her ears. Then she began to play. At first, the notes came out soft and shaky, but with each passing second, her confidence grew. Her fingers found their rhythm. The melody began to flow. The hall slowly quieted down, the whispers fading into silence. The tune she played wasn't something she had learned from a book. It was something she had created, born out of her long evenings of practice, her sadness, her hope, and her determination. It was her story, told without words. By the time she reached the final note, the hall was still. For a moment, she thought she had failed. But then the crowd erupted in applause, loud, long, and real. She stood up, her eyes wide, not sure what to do. People were clapping, cheering, even standing. Her teacher smiled proudly from the corner of the hall, his eyes shining with pride. When she walked off stage, her legs were shaking, but her heart was light. The same people who had once mocked her were now whispering words of praise. Some of them even looked amazed. Later that night, when the results were announced, she didn't expect much. But when the host read her name as the winner, the hall filled with cheers again. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to react. Then she walked to the stage slowly, holding the small golden trophy in her hands. It wasn't the trophy that mattered to her. It was what it meant. All the laughter, all the teasing, it had all led her to this moment. She had proved not to them but to herself that she could do it. After the show, many people came to talk to her. Some apologized for laughing before. Others told her how beautiful her music was. She smiled politely, still trying to take it all in. But among all the voices, her teachers stood out. "You played with your heart," he said softly. "That's something no one can teach." The next morning, she woke up early, still holding the trophy on her bedside table. Sunlight poured through the window. Her mother came in, smiling proudly. "You did it," she said. She smiled back. "We did it," she replied. But even though she had won, something inside her told her this was just the beginning. The performance had awakened something deeper, a hunger to learn more, to become better. She continued to visit the old music hall every day. The teacher pushed her harder now. He began showing her more complex pieces, explaining rhythm, tone, and balance. Sometimes she got frustrated when she couldn't get a passage right. He would chuckle and say, "Patience. Music isn't a race. It's a journey." The more she learned, the more she realized how vast the world of music was. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, but each time she reminded herself how far she had come. Outside the hall, life carried on as usual. People still gossiped, still laughed, still went about their days. But now when they passed her on the street, they smiled instead of smirked. Some even asked her to teach their children. She was still the same person, same small house, same simple clothes. But the way people saw her had changed. That respect, earned through hard work and persistence, meant more to her than anything. One afternoon, while practicing, her teacher stopped her mid-song. "Close your eyes," he said. She obeyed. "Now play," he instructed. She hesitated, but then her fingers began to move. She played without looking at the keys, trusting her memory, trusting her heart. When she finished, the old man clapped slowly. "That," he said, "is music. When you stop thinking about the notes and start feeling them, that's when it becomes real." That moment stayed with her. She began to play more freely after that, sometimes creating her own melodies, sometimes mixing songs she had learned. But her journey wasn't all smooth. One day she came to the hall only to find the door locked. A notice on the wall said the building would be closed for renovation for several months. She felt her heart sink. The hall had become her second home. Her teacher found her standing there looking lost. "Don't worry," he said with a reassuring smile. "We'll find another way." He invited her to his home where an old upright piano stood in his living room. The keys were worn, but the sound was still rich. "You can practice here," he said. She spent many evenings there, sometimes staying until late. His small house smelled of old books and tea, and the walls were covered in pictures of orchestras and concerts from his younger days. He would tell her stories between lessons, about traveling to different cities, about the joy of performing for people who truly listened. Those evenings were peaceful, She learned not just how to play, but how to feel every note. One evening, while she was practicing, he sat quietly watching her. When she finished, he said, "You remind me of myself when I was young." She smiled shyly. "Really?" He nodded. "Yes, the same fire in your eyes. The same hunger to learn. Never lose that." Weeks passed, then months. The renovation of the hall was finally completed, and it reopened with a new shine. The town decided to host another event to celebrate. When she stepped inside the hall again, the new paint gleamed under the lights. But her eyes went straight to the piano. It had been cleaned and tuned. It looked almost new now. Her teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "How about we show them how far you've come?" She smiled. "I'd love that." The crowd gathered once again, just like before. Some familiar faces, some new ones. But this time the whispers weren't mocking, they were curious. People wanted to hear her play again. When she sat down at the piano, she felt calm. The fear that had once shaken her hands was gone. She looked out at the crowd and saw her mother sitting in the front row, her eyes full of pride. She began to play, a new piece, more complex than before, but filled with warmth. Each note carried her story, her struggles, her growth, her hope. As the melody filled the hall, people listened quietly. Even the children who used to giggle now sat still, wide-eyed. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Her teacher stood and clapped the loudest. "You did it," he whispered when she came off stage. She smiled. "We did it," she said softly. That night, as she walked home, she looked up at the sky. The stars shone bright above her. For the first time, she truly believed that no dream was too big. No voice too small. The girl who was once laughed at had made the world listen. The day of the big performance arrived, and the town seemed to buzz with excitement. The sun shone brightly over the small streets, casting warm light on the homes and shops. People were already heading toward the hall, chatting and laughing. There was an energy in the air that made her heart race, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She woke up early, more out of excitement than sleep. Her mother had prepared a simple breakfast, but she could barely touch the food. Her mind was already at the hall, imagining the piano under the stage lights and the crowd waiting to hear her. When she finally arrived, the hall was packed. Chairs were set in neat rows, and the stage was decorated with flowers and a new piano gleaming under the bright lights. The curtains were drawn, and behind them, performers waited for their turn. There were dancers in colorful costumes, singers tuning their voices, and a boy juggling small balls as a warm-up act. She stood quietly at the side, clutching her sheet music. The announcer's voice boomed through the microphone, introducing each performer with cheer. One by one, people went on stage. The crowd clapped loudly after every act, and she could feel their energy even from the side. Her heart pounded harder when the announcer said, "And now, please welcome our next performer." Her name. The world seemed to slow down for a moment. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, and walked toward the piano. The light from above made the stage look enormous, and she could see the faces of the audience, though not clearly. Some of them were familiar, some strangers. A few whispered as she passed, some skeptical, some curious. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys. The hall was silent, all eyes on her. The first note she pressed came out soft and delicate, almost hesitant. Her hand shook slightly, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. She remembered all the evenings she had spent practicing, the late nights at her teacher's home, the struggles she had faced, and the words of encouragement she had received. She took another deep breath and began to play again, this time letting her feelings guide her. The melody flowed from her fingers, gentle at first, then growing stronger. Each note told a story. The nervousness she had felt when people laughed at her, the determination she had built in secret, and the joy of discovering her own voice. The audience slowly quieted. Even the children who had come with their parents stopped fidgeting. She could hear the subtle sounds of the piano echoing through the hall, blending with the soft hum of anticipation. Her teacher, sitting in the corner, watched silently. He knew how much this moment meant to her. He had seen her struggle, seen her practice tirelessly, and now finally it was time for the world to hear what she had learned. The music swelled, filling the hall with emotion. It wasn't perfect. Some notes stumbled, some keys weren't fully in tune, but that didn't matter. What she played carried honesty and feeling, and that was what touched the audience. She closed her eyes, letting the piano become an extension of herself. She played a piece she had written herself, a melody that grew from hours of practice and late-night inspiration. The tune moved through gentle highs and lows, soft whispers and strong declarations, each note echoing her journey. The crowd listened quietly, captivated by the story unfolding without words. As she reached the middle of the piece, her confidence grew. Her hands moved more freely, dancing across the keys with precision and emotion. The sound was alive, filling every corner of the hall. She could feel the energy of the audience, the way they leaned in, waiting for each note. For the first time, she forgot about the whispers, the mockery, the doubts of the past. This was her moment. The stage no longer seemed intimidating. It was a place where she could speak without saying a word, where her music could be heard by all. The final notes approached. Her fingers moved with care, slowing slightly, drawing out the emotion she wanted to leave behind. She pressed the last key and held it, letting the sound resonate and fade naturally. Then silence, a brief suspended silence. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting maybe polite claps or quiet murmurs. But then, one by one, the audience began to clap. The applause grew louder, filling the hall, louder than she had ever imagined. People were on their feet, cheering and clapping with excitement. Some even wiped away tears, moved by the emotion of her music. Her legs trembled as she stood up. She didn't know whether to bow or cry. She felt the weight of months of practice, hard work, and courage in that applause. She had done it. She had made them listen. Her teacher walked over, a proud smile on his face. "You did it," he whispered. She could only nod, too overwhelmed for words. Backstage, people came up to her. Some were familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and family. Some were strangers who had heard her play for the first time. They praised her, shaking her hands, hugging her, smiling with amazement. Even those who had once laughed at her looked surprised and humbled. "You're incredible," one of the older women said. "I didn't expect that at all." "You have a gift," she smiled politely, her heart still racing. "Thank you," she said softly. Later, when the judges announced the winners, she was called to the stage. Her name was read first for the top prize. She walked up slowly, clutching her sheet music, and accepted a small golden trophy. The crowd clapped again, cheering as she smiled at her teacher and her mother, who had tears in her eyes. That night, walking home with the trophy, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and joy. The streets were quiet now, the energy of the day settling into calm. She held the trophy carefully. But what mattered most was not the object, it was the moment, the recognition, and the feeling that she had finally proven something to herself. She thought back to the first time she had touched the old, dusty piano in the community hall. The laughter that had surrounded her then seemed far away now. She realized that those moments of mockery, though painful, had shaped her determination. Without them, she might never have worked so hard, never discovered the depth of her own talent. Her teacher walked beside her, breaking the comfortable silence. "Do you know what this means?" he asked. She shook her head. "It means you have the courage to follow your passion even when people doubt you. That's what makes a true artist," she smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You did all the work," he replied. "I just guided your hands." That night she lay in bed, unable to sleep immediately. She replayed the day over and over in her mind. The nervous walk to the stage, the first shaky notes, the melody flowing through her fingers, and the thunderous applause at the end. She felt proud. Not just because she had won, but because she had faced fear and pushed through it. The next morning, she returned to her practice. The trophy sat on her desk, a small reminder of what she had achieved. But she knew that winning was not the ultimate goal. She wanted to get better, to learn more, to create music that could touch hearts as deeply as that first melody had. Her teacher continued to push her. He introduced more complex pieces, taught her about rhythm, emotion, and performance. Some days were frustrating. She would make mistakes, and sometimes the notes just didn't sound right. But each time she remembered the look on the faces of the audience, the applause, and the feeling of pure joy that came when she played her heart out. Outside the hall, life continued as usual. The same streets, the same neighbors, the same small-town gossip. But now there was a new respect in the air. People who had doubted her came to watch her play. Children who had once giggled when they saw her walk past now asked her questions about music, eager to learn. She had changed too, not just as a musician, but as a person. The experience taught her patience, perseverance, and the power of following her passion despite fear or mockery. She learned that talent is not just about skill, but about courage, heart, and determination. Even months later, she would remember that day, the day she faced the crowd, the day she let the music speak, the day the world finally listened. And every time she sat at the piano after that, she played not to impress but to express herself, to share her story in a way that words never could. The girl who had once been mocked for her dream had grown into someone who could inspire others, someone whose courage proved that belief in oneself could overcome even the loudest laughter. She had learned that day that fear was temporary, but music, the music that comes from the heart, is forever. After that first performance, word spread quickly through the small town. People who had once doubted her curiosity now spoke in hushed, respectful tones. Children told their friends about the girl who had played a melody that made even adults stop and listen. Her story became something of a quiet legend, a reminder that talent could surprise everyone, even those who laughed first. Despite the attention, she remained the same. She didn't let pride or compliments change who she was. She still woke up early, practiced with her teacher, and returned home to help her mother with daily chores. But now, when she approached the piano, there was a new confidence in her movements. The keys no longer felt intimidating. They were a friend she had learned to trust. One afternoon, she was practicing a piece that her teacher had just introduced. It was more complicated than anything she had attempted before, with fast sequences and delicate transitions. She struggled at first, hitting wrong notes and feeling frustrated. Her teacher sat nearby, his face calm and patient. "Take a deep breath," he said softly. "Music is not just about the notes. It's about how you feel them. Let your hands follow your heart." She closed her eyes and started again. This time she didn't worry about mistakes. Her fingers moved with a rhythm guided by emotion, not just memory. The notes sounded cleaner, richer, and the melody seemed to flow naturally. When she finished, her teacher nodded approvingly. "Better, much better. You're learning to breathe with the music." Even as her skills grew, some people still remembered the girl they had once mocked. A few would occasionally tease her behind her back, but their voices no longer held power. They could laugh, but she had already discovered something far more valuable: the ability to believe in herself. Then came another opportunity, a community event where she was invited to perform in front of a larger audience. This time it wasn't just neighbors or classmates. People from nearby towns came to watch. The thought of so many eyes and ears made her nervous, but the memory of the first performance gave her courage. The day arrived, and she entered the hall to find it bustling with excitement. She saw the same piano on the stage, polished and ready. As she approached it, she noticed some faces in the audience. People who had laughed at her the first time she touched the instrument. Their expressions were unreadable, but she could feel their curiosity. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage slowly, taking a deep breath. She remembered her teacher's words, "Let your hands follow your heart." She sat down at the piano and closed her eyes, letting her fingers find the keys. She started with a soft, gentle melody. The notes seemed to float through the air, weaving around the room, filling the space with warmth. She could feel the audience leaning in, listening carefully. Some faces were filled with surprise, others with admiration. The whispers and laughter that had once greeted her were gone. As the music continued, her confidence grew. She played a piece she had composed herself, full of emotion and life. Every note told a story: the long hours of practice, the quiet nights when only the piano and her thoughts kept her company, the determination to keep going despite ridicule. The audience sat in silence, captivated. Even the adults who had once laughed were now leaning forward, listening intently. The children watched with wide eyes, amazed at the speed and precision of her fingers, the way the melody rose and fell like a living thing. Her teacher watched from the corner, a proud smile on his face. He knew this was more than just a performance. It was a moment of transformation. The audience wasn't just hearing music, they were witnessing courage, perseverance, and heart. By the middle of her performance, the hall was completely silent except for the music. People had stopped fidgeting, stopped whispering, and stopped looking around. They were fully present, completely absorbed. Every note she played seemed to speak directly to them, telling her story without words. She had never felt anything like it. The connection between the music and the listeners was almost tangible. She realized that this was why she had endured all the mockery and doubt. It had led her to this moment, to show what she was capable of. As the piece reached its climax, her fingers flew over the keys with precision and grace. The melody was both powerful and delicate, full of emotion and depth. Some in the audience closed their eyes, moved by the beauty and honesty of the music. Others leaned forward, unable to look away, mesmerized by her skill and passion. Then slowly she brought the music to a gentle, soft ending. She held the last note, letting it linger in the air, and opened her eyes. For a moment there was complete silence. The hall seemed to hold its breath, as if no one wanted to disturb the magic of the moment. And then the applause began. It started softly but quickly grew louder and louder, filling every corner of the hall. People stood, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. The same faces that had once mocked her now looked at her with awe and respect. They had underestimated her, and now they were humbled by her talent. She stood slowly, still stunned by the reaction. Her hands trembled slightly, but she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The sound of applause, the cheers, the amazed expressions, it was more than she had ever imagined. She realized that the music had done exactly what she had hoped. It had spoken for her. Her teacher came forward, his eyes shining with pride. "You've done it again," he whispered. "They are listening now." She smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't believe it," she said softly. "All those people, they're really listening." "Yes," he said, "and they'll remember this moment because they've seen what happens when someone follows their heart." After the performance, people came up to her to congratulate her. Some apologized for laughing at her in the past. Others praised her for her skill and the emotion in her music. She thanked them politely, but inside she felt a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't just played the piano. She had changed the way people saw her, and in some small way the way they saw themselves too. That night, as she walked home with her mother, she held her trophy carefully. The streets were quiet, but the glow of the streetlights made everything feel magical. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The first time she had touched that dusty piano, the late nights of practice, the laughter, the doubt, and the unwavering support of her teacher. "I never imagined it would feel like this," she said softly to her mother. Her mother smiled and squeezed her hand. "You earned it," she said. "Not just the applause, but the respect. You earned it through your hard work and courage." She smiled back, feeling a sense of calm and happiness she had never known before. The music had not only changed the way others saw her, but it had changed the way she saw herself. She realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, and that her dreams were worth pursuing, no matter what others said. In the weeks that followed, her performances became the talk of the town. People from nearby villages came to hear her play. Children asked her to teach them simple songs. Even the adults, some of whom had once doubted her, sought her advice on music. She had become a symbol of perseverance and courage, someone who showed that talent and determination could overcome ridicule and doubt. But she remained humble. She continued to practice daily, always striving to improve. She knew that talent alone wasn't enough. Dedication and heart were just as important. And every time she sat at the piano, she remembered the journey, the struggles, the late nights, the laughter she had endured, and the joy of discovering her own voice. One evening, as she practiced a new piece, she paused and looked out the window at the quiet town. The streets were empty, but she felt the presence of the people who had once laughed at her, now quietly cheering her in their hearts. She smiled to herself, feeling a sense of peace. She understood now that music was more than just notes on a page. It was a language of the heart, a way to connect with others, to share emotions, and to inspire. And she had discovered that, even in a small town, a single person with courage and passion could make a difference. The girl who had once been mocked for her dream had become someone who could change minds and touch hearts. She had learned that silence and doubt could turn to awe when met with patience, practice, and belief in oneself. And she knew that her journey was only beginning. There were more melodies to play, more emotions to explore, and more people to inspire. After that unforgettable performance, life in the small town began to shift quietly but noticeably. The girl who had once been laughed at now moved through her days with a quiet confidence. People who had doubted her no longer whispered cruel comments. Instead, they watched her with curiosity, admiration, and in some cases, disbelief. They were beginning to see that the quiet, determined girl they had ignored had a talent that could not be denied. She continued her routine as usual, waking early, helping her mother with household chores, and visiting her teacher for lessons. But now when she entered the hall to practice, there was a new energy surrounding her. Children would peek through the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of her hands dancing over the keys. Adults who had once frowned upon her passion now offered words of encouragement or simply nodded respectfully as she walked past. The mockery that had once haunted her seemed like a distant memory, replaced with the excitement of possibility. One afternoon, her teacher called her over with a warm smile. "I have an idea," he said. "There's a regional music festival coming up. It's a bigger stage, more people, more attention. I think you're ready." Her eyes widened with both fear and excitement. "But what if I fail?" she asked quietly. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've faced fear before. Remember the first time you played in the town hall? All those doubts, all that laughter, it didn't stop you. And it won't stop you now. You just have to trust your music and yourself." That night, she sat at her piano at home, imagining the stage, the crowd, and the notes she would play. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she closed her eyes, letting her heart guide her. She remembered all the times she had struggled alone, the nights when no one believed in her, and the small victories that had carried her forward. She realized that the journey had taught her more than just music. It had taught her courage, patience, and the strength to continue despite fear. When the day of the festival arrived, the hall was enormous compared to what she was used to. The stage was high, the lights brighter, and the audience larger. She could see hundreds of faces, some curious, some skeptical, some supportive. The noise of the crowd made her stomach flutter. But she reminded herself that she was not there to please anyone but herself. As she stepped onto the stage, memories of her first performance came rushing back. The trembling hands, the hesitant notes, the moment the hall fell silent in awe. She took a deep breath, feeling the same mixture of nerves and excitement. The piano before her was sleek, polished, and almost intimidating. She sat down and placed her fingers gently on the keys. She began to play. At first, the melody was soft, deliberate, almost shy. But as her confidence grew, the music blossomed. She poured every feeling she had into each note. The fear she had overcome, the joy of discovery, the pride in her hard work, and the love she had for the music itself. The audience fell silent, drawn in by the story her fingers were telling. Her teacher, standing at the side of the stage, watched with pride. He knew how much this performance meant. This was not just about music. It was about proving to the world that a single person with determination and passion could break barriers and change perceptions. As she reached the middle of her piece, she noticed faces in the crowd soften with amazement. Some who had doubted her earlier in life were now leaning forward, their expressions full of respect. Others had tears in their eyes, moved by the emotion and sincerity of her music. Children sat wide-eyed, completely captivated by the skill and depth she displayed. By the time she reached the climax of her piece, every note seemed to float in the air, carrying her story across the hall. It was as if the music itself had become a bridge between her heart and the audience. The once skeptical onlookers were now completely absorbed, their earlier doubts replaced with admiration and awe. Finally, she played the last note, holding it gently until it faded into silence. For a heartbeat, the hall was still. Then thunderous applause erupted. People jumped to their feet, clapping, cheering, and whistling. Some wept openly, touched by the honesty and beauty of her music. Those who had once mocked her looked astonished, realizing how wrong they had been. She stood slowly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the reaction. Her legs trembled, but the feeling inside her chest was like warmth spreading through her entire being. She had done it. She had made the world listen. Backstage, people came to congratulate her. Some were strangers amazed by her talent. Some were old neighbors who had once doubted her abilities, now humbled and apologetic. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. She smiled, feeling both joy and relief. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me." Her teacher joined them, smiling proudly. "You've done more than just play the piano," he said. "You've changed hearts. You've shown everyone that courage and talent, when combined, can do incredible things." The awards were announced, and once again, she was named the top performer. She accepted her trophy gracefully, but it wasn't the award that mattered most. It was the realization that she had transformed not just her own life, but the way people around her perceived possibility effort, and talent. Over the following weeks, the recognition she received continued to grow. Newspapers in the town wrote about her, praising her dedication and talent. Teachers in nearby schools mentioned her as an example of perseverance and courage. Children came to her for advice, eager to learn music themselves. Even those who had once mocked her approached her with curiosity and respect. Despite the attention, she remained humble. She continued to practice diligently, learning more challenging pieces and refining her technique. She also began composing her own music more regularly, expressing emotions she could not put into words. Her teacher guided her, but she also discovered new ways of playing on her own, experimenting with melody, rhythm, and harmony. One afternoon, while practicing a piece she had composed, her teacher paused and said, "You've come a long way. Do you realize what you've accomplished?" She looked up, curious. "I've won competitions. I've performed in front of many people." "But what do you mean?" He smiled. "You've inspired people. You've changed how they see you, yes, but more importantly, you've shown them that determination, courage, and heart can overcome doubt and mockery. That's something no one can take away from you." She paused, letting the words sink in. She realized he was right. The journey had not only been about music, it had been about resilience, self-belief, and the power of following one's passion. The town began to embrace her as a symbol of hope and perseverance. Children were encouraged to try their talents no matter what others said. Parents reminded their kids of her story whenever someone doubted their dreams. She had become more than just a talented pianist. She had become a living example of courage and determination. Despite her growing recognition, she stayed grounded. She never let success make her arrogant. She still helped her mother with chores, still practiced for hours, and still listened carefully to her teacher's advice. She knew that talent alone wasn't enough. Hard work, dedication, and humility were equally important. One evening, after a long day of practice, she sat by her piano and reflected on her journey. She thought of the day she first touched the dusty instrument in the old community hall. She remembered the laughter, the whispers, the doubt, and the fear. And she remembered the quiet determination that had pushed her to continue. She realized that those early moments of ridicule had shaped her, made her stronger, and prepared her for the stage, the audience, and the challenges ahead. Without those moments, she might never have discovered the depth of her talent or the strength of her heart. Her teacher walked in quietly, observing her thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. "I'm thinking about how far I've come," she said softly, "and how it all started with a single step, a single moment when I chose to try even though people laughed at me." He nodded approvingly. "Exactly. That step changed everything. And now you have the chance to keep changing the world, one note at a time." In the months that followed, she continued performing at local events, festivals, and even small concerts in neighboring towns. Each performance carried the same honesty, passion, and heart that had first captured the audience's attention. People came not just to hear music, but to witness the story of perseverance, courage, and the triumph of the human spirit. The girl who had once been mocked for touching the piano had grown into a young woman whose music could inspire, heal, and transform. She had proved that belief in oneself combined with hard work and dedication could overcome doubt and ridicule. Her journey became a source of inspiration for everyone who heard her story. Years later, she would look back on that first day at the community hall and smile. The laughter, the mockery, and the doubts had been painful, but they had also been necessary. They had shown her the strength she had inside, the power of her passion, and the importance of never giving up on a dream. She sat at her piano, hands poised above the keys, and began to play a melody of her own creation. The notes flowed effortlessly, full of emotion and life, telling a story without words, a story of courage, perseverance, and triumph. The audience listened, as they always did, captivated by the music. Some were moved to tears, some were inspired to follow their own dreams, and some simply sat in awe, realizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. And as she played, she knew that her journey was not just about music. It was about the power of determination, the importance of believing in oneself, and the beauty of following one's passion, no matter what others might say. The girl who had once been mocked had become someone who could change hearts one note at a time. and she knew that as long as she continued to play, she could continue to inspire the world.